Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build this $350 Xeon based gaming PC, and this is one of those 100% pure performance, every last bang for your buck kind of builds. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to Zach's Tech Turf. Today I'm going to be showing you what's all inside this $350 new plus used gaming PC. Then we're going to talk about why I chose all these parts specifically, and then of course we're going to benchmark it. And if you're new here and you want to see more benchmarking or PC building videos, then hit that subscribe button down below and also that notification bell. That way you never miss an episode. But yeah, before we get into it, let me quickly pay some bills. NordVPN is one of the highest rated VPNs or virtual private networks that allow you to browse the internet privately, securely, and with no history logs whatsoever. It's super easy to use. All you do is select which server from around the world you want to connect to, and you're done. Enjoy clutch features like double VPN protection for extra security, an internet kill switch for the very rare time the VPN disconnects, super fast peer-to-peer downloads, and unlimited bandwidth for just above $3 a month if you sign up for 2 years. I actually signed up for a year of NordVPN at full retail price way before they hooked me up with a referral link and a discount code for you guys, so I obviously recommend them as my go-to VPN service. Head on over to nordvpn.com/Zach or click the first link in the description to learn more. Alright, so to kick things off, can we take a moment to just appreciate that there's no OEM in this build? I've said this before like 100 times already, but I personally think that starting with an OEM like a Dell Optiplex is a really good idea for you new budget builders out there, but if you're one of those type of people that needs your build to be 100% custom, then this is the guide for you. Starting with the processor, I decided to bring back the Xeon, and this time I went with a Xeon X3470, which you can easily find on AliExpress for $22 or even on eBay for $23 to $24. The Xeon X3470 is rocking 4 cores and 8 threads that boost up to 3.6 GHz, even more if you're going to overclock it obviously, and for $22 this is some serious value. For the motherboard, I went with an Asus P7H55M Pro, which I found off eBay for just $68, and this is a micro ATX board with 4 RAM slots, which is perfect. Now, one thing to note is that you can get true overclocking support with a P55 motherboard. With an H55 motherboard, you can really only up the base clock, and that doesn't work out so well sometimes in my opinion, but yeah, the P55 obviously costs more money, so that's going to be up to you. Going back to those RAM slots, the reason why I wanted my motherboard to have 4 is because you can find some really nice deals on a 4x4GB DDR3 RAM kit, which is what I found for $35 also off eBay. Keep in mind that these RAM sticks aren't an exact set, but they are all 1600 megahertz and they work perfectly right out of the box. After that, we get to the CPU cooler, and this time I went with a cooler that I never used before, and I actually had to overnight it on Amazon for this video. This cheap $14 Thermaltake cooler that works specifically for LGA 1156 CPU sockets. Next up, we have the case, and for my second build guide now, we're using the Rosewell FBM X1, and this thing always drops on sale down to $20 on Newegg. The Rosewell FBM X1 isn't packing any crazy features and it's not rocking the best build quality, but in my opinion, if you're going to build one of these pure performance kind of builds, then you don't want to waste too much money on the case. One thing to note is that there is a nasty lip that will affect installing some graphics cards. You can always remove it with a Dremel if you need to, but just be aware of that if you're buying a bigger graphics card. Speaking of the GPU, the card that I decided to go with today is the ASRock 8GB RX 570, which you can easily find used on eBay for $100, which is what I did, but you can also see here that the card is also selling for as low as $80 if you're patient enough for the better deals. The RX 570 off the top of my head is the most that I would pair with a cheapo Xeon processor like this, but once we get into the benchmarks, we'll see if there's any true bottleneck going on. Wrapping up the parts list, we're up to storage, and just like my previous $250 Optiplex gaming PC build guide that I just uploaded last week, I decided to roll with this ADATA SU635 500GB SSD. This SSD is the cheapest new model on Amazon at the time of making this video, so for just $46, I think it's a pretty good deal. And finally, the last required part on this parts list is the power supply, and once again I recycled a part from my latest Optiplex guide, and I used the same EVGA 550W M1 PSU because it's super easy to find at $40 off Amazon, and I really like how it has all black cables, which is rare to find at this price point. One last optional part that I decided to add was these cheapo one color Molex lights. You definitely don't need to include this on your parts list, especially if you want to keep it under $350, and honestly the only reason why I did it was so my B-roll intro and my thumbnail look better. So there you have it, that's what the parts list is looking like for this 2019 $350 pure performance gaming PC build guide. Once again, the theme of my video is to provide you with a parts list that doesn't have so many crazy once in a lifetime deals, and I can confidently say that if you're in the US, this is a pretty easy parts list to find, and you might even be able to find it cheaper than I did. And now it's time for the best part of the video, the benchmarking. And even before I built this thing, probably just like you're feeling now, I was super anxious to see if the RX 570 was indeed bottlenecked by our cheapo Xeon X3470. And as always, the settings that you're about to see for each game are the settings that I would personally use if this was my system. The first game up was none other than Fortnite, and with our normal settings of 1080p and high, I got an average frame rate of 99 FPS. Also, like normal, Fortnite always has these super low 1% and 0.1% lows if you don't cap the frame rate, so just know if you did lock it down to 60 FPS, it would probably be an even smoother playing experience. The next game up was Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and in 1080p and high settings with FXAA, I got an average frame rate of 102 FPS. These lows were also caused partially by the 3470, and you'll want to limit your FPS depending on the refresh rate of your monitor if you do want to get an even smoother playing experience. After that, I fired up PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and to my surprise, I actually got a 77 FPS average with 1080p and high settings. PUBG has come a long way in terms of optimization from when it first launched, but it's still by no means what I would call optimized, so I was very happy to see this smooth of a frame rate. After that, I tested Rainbow Six Siege with the built-in benchmarking tool, and in 1080p and very high settings, I got a super smooth 146 frames per second. As you can see in the top left-hand corner, the GPU was maxing out at about 100%, and the CPU was only hovering around 80, so no CPU bottleneck for this one. Rocket League followed up next, and in 1080p and high quality settings with FXAA anti-aliasing at medium, I got an average frame rate of 115. Is there any way that we can get a like down below for scoring a goal during this benchmarking run? Following that, I tested Far Cry New Dawn, definitely a tough one to run, and in 1080p and normal settings, aka medium, I got an impressive frame rate average of 51. As you can see with this one, the GPU was maxed out at 100%, and the CPU was only ever around 60%, so I think we found ourselves a good match with the RX 570 and Xeon X3470. Finally, the last game I benchmarked was the brand new Mordhau, which I actually just made a dedicated benchmarking video on, and in 1080p and medium settings, I got 52 frames per second, and this was indeed tested during an online match, so that CPU was really being tested here with all the people everywhere in the huge open map. With the gaming benchmarks out of the way, I did want to quickly talk about thermals, because this case definitely doesn't have the best airflow, and our $14 CPU cooler is a little sketchy in my opinion. Now, I didn't run a full-on stress test because that's not the results you'll actually see in real life, so with gaming and the CPU demanding titles, it only ever got to about 75 degrees Celsius max, and I honestly don't even think I ever saw the GPU get above 70, which is pretty great in my opinion. Well, there you have it. As you can see, to my surprise, honestly, I think the Xeon X3470 and RX 570 actually make a pretty good combination of parts. Keep in mind that here in mid-2019, we are starting to see the first generation Ryzen prices come down lower and lower on the used market, so those will definitely be dominating these budget builds, but for right now, finding $20 CPUs is still the right thing to do in my opinion at this price point. Well, that wraps up my new plus used $350 gaming PC build guide. As always, drop a comment down below about what you're thinking of this build or what you would personally do to change it. After that, feel free to head on over to one of these two videos if you haven't seen them yet, and definitely hit that subscribe button because coming up next, we got some more benchmarking to do. You don't want to miss that video.